Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of RPG Limit Breaks. I am GhostKumo, and I am going to be joined by a few of my good pals here. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Alright.
Might as well start with the ringleader first.
My name's ChampionBeef. You may have seen me before on this channel running Trails games, SMT games, Monochrome Mobius, a bunch of other JRPGs, but I'm mostly known for the Trails games and all the runs I do of them.
Hello. My name is Schtolteheim. I run Trails in the Sky, as well as other miscellaneous Falcom games. I'm one of the admins over at the Falcom Speedrunning community, and I help organize our community showcase events like marathons on RPG Limit Break that you might have seen before.
And last but not least.
And hello, I am James Picard 007. I do a few trail speed runs. I do some east speed runs, but mostly I just hang around here and cling onto everybody else's success. I mean,
Hey, now, don't sell yourself short.
hey, I'm only
The thing
5'7",
people do
I'm below average.
The thing people just do in the Anyways, hi. So, in addition to being one of RPG Limit Break's staff, I also happen to be one of the co-founders of the Trails series speedrun Discord server. There's actually kind of an interesting story behind that, so I'll just indulge a little bit on how this community started, because I happen to have direct insight into that. So, the Trails series in the West, also known as Legend of Heroes, also known as Age Densetsu, also known as Kiseki, also known as Dragon Slayer 14, if you want to be a real nerd.
God.
Anyways, so around 2015 and 2016 was the early release of Trails of Cold Steel, which sort of, in terms of like marketing, was like a very, very soft reset for the series. There was also the Trails in the Sky games getting released shortly before in the West, but these games, go back like 20 years. There's definitely like, you think the localization history of this series is weird now. It used to be a lot worse in terms of pacing. But so me and another East speedrun admin by the name of TuxDev, who ran East 1 at Limit Break 2022 with myself and Dowolf, we were posting a whole bunch in the East speedrun server about some ideas for how to go about running the Trails games, because when we first played Cold Steel 1, we were like, this is unbelievably broken. There is so much potential for speedruns here. And then eventually we started up a server, invited a few people who were talking some basic routing things. This was back when it was on PS3 and Vita, and a much, much longer speedrun than the game is now. We can probably get into that a little bit more soon.
Is Beef ever willing to tell you about the 14-something hour Vita speedrun for Cold Steel?
12 hours for CS2, yeah.
Those were the days. And essentially, server gets to about 10 people, and we find out that there's another server started by Cent, aka Dragon Sentinel, who many of you might know is the prize guy for GDQ. He actually ran Trails of Cold Steel 1 and started up a server, and then we eventually merged the two servers together. So he's been an admin in there ever since, because I didn't want to say, like, hey, we already have a server, but you've been doing your thing, so I didn't want to, like, kick him out or something like that. So he's been a fellow admin there as well. But that's more or less how this whole shindig got started. Over the course of the last almost 8 years at this point, the server has grown from about a dozen people who are just speedrunners who also happen to be Trails fans to, I think we're up to about 320 members in the Discord.
Yeah, it is wild how much this community has grown, particularly within the last 5 or 6 years, as we started doing community showcases on RPG Limit Break, as we started getting more Falcom games and Trails games specifically into the Limit Break main event here. It's been really inspiring and validating to see.
We definitely don't
Yeah.
have that many runners. We don't have 300 runners by any means, but the community is just fantastic regardless.
Yeah, there's a ton of overlap with East as well. I mean, obviously, it kind of started as an offshoot of the speedrun server for East. But yeah, just Falcom fans tend to flock to both series.
Yeah.
Yeah, that all happened in
Yeah.
2016. I started speedrunning Trails in 2014. Actually, I've been at it for a full decade now, which is crazy to say.
Happy
Mhm.
birthday.
Well, 10 years now.
Yeah. I haven't been speedrunning quite that long. I started speedrunning Nayuta, actually, which is a spin-off of the Trails series, around 2016, 2017. Before that, I strictly played the casual games. I played Sky FC when it came out on PSP. I got it as a Christmas present because I really liked the soundtrack I had heard on YouTube. And I was like, wow, I gotta get this game. It's got bangers. And then it broke my heart.
And then we had to wait how many godforsaken years for
It was
second chapter?
4 years until second chapter came out on PC.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go ahead.
I was gonna say, and speaking of Naruto, that's now in English, which is kind of nice.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yeah, just like what little I have played of the game and seen of the game, there's definitely just something I miss about that like PSP era of Falcom.
Yeah.
The game,
Namco
the game's-
definitely had some rough around the edges when I played it, but it was overall solid.
It's
yeah,
It's the last game I would consider a classic Falcom game, or like from their sort of mid 2000s PC era. It looks more like Zwei 2 and Gurumin than it does Celceta or Cold Steel, despite coming out around the same time.
Yeah.
yeah. It was. I want to say it was a PSP game.
Yeah, PSP in 2012.
Yeah, it looks like it's on the E7 engine of all games. So
Yeah, it is.
that it's Tasaki Momiyama, one of my favorites of Falcom's composers. Anytime I hear the soundtrack from that game, I'm like, oh, this is so good.
Oh god. Sorry to derail this. You were saying?
Yeah,
That is-
we could either be here talking about the music all day or all about speedrunning all day.
Yes, we could talk about the music for an entire podcast and a half.
Oh god.
Yeah, I mean, you guys should maybe do that. Best speedrun music tracks, because I know at least some of my motivation for running these games is just like sometimes I'm just listening to the soundtrack and like, man, I want to do runs of this again.
Oh, absolutely. Why do you think I started the last community marathon an hour early?
Yep, just an excuse to play more music. I definitely would love to actually get more Trails music in the Limit Break playlist, because Falcom is actually they're usually pretty cool about people using their music for at least most songs aren't going to get you.
Yeah, I think it's the only vocal ones that could be a potential
The
problem, but all the
vocals
others are
got
totally
this,
fine.
And they're just like, yeah, you're free to use our music for streams, weddings. They specifically say weddings on their website, which is
I mean, I'd do it. I would. Yeah, absolutely.
Look, somebody walking down the aisle to Silver Will would be really funny.
Oh, that would be a choice.
I don't know. I think you could probably get away like using the CS4 credits music or something way better, since that is like an actual wedding scene.
Yeah, Silver Will as an aisle theme. I don't know.
I mean,
about
it sets
that.
the tone.
It's a choice.
For sure.
It's a choice.
At least it's not the Hamel version.
Oh no!
Oh no!
Yeah, I don't know. That was the
Don't
song
walk
that people
down
said.
the aisle to the Hamel version of Silver Hit Will, please.
No, reminds me of all the people who walk down the aisle to every breath you take, and it's just like you do realize what the song's about, right?
Oh,
Who does that?
A lot of people. Like,
I mean, we could probably go all day about inappropriate wedding song choices, but
it was just a song people said in chat. But yeah, I mean that song alone was like part of it was funny to me like 6 years ago when we did the first Falcom RTA marathon, and I was just like, man, the song is a banger. I'm glad people are here watching. I think that was the first time we ever had Trails in the Sky on the channel.
Yeah. Silver Will
I think
was
so.
what convinced me to start playing the series in general.
Shout outs to Captain.
Yeah.
So that actually kind of cuts into something that I kind of wanted to briefly talk about. So all three of you have run Trails in the Sky at Limit Break in the past, as well as Captain, who was the first person to show the game on the channel, and somehow, by some tech miracle, was able to join us remotely during Limit Break 2022 when we had our 3-player co-op run with Beef and Schtolteheim. So, just kind of some questions about it. What is it that really compelled you to get into this series of games to speedrun? Because as of yet, we're at 10 games in English, working on the 11th coming out later this year.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for me, I played first chapter in 2013, 2014, and I just love this game so much that I wanted to play it more. So how I got started was I actually was running New Game Plus. And in order to do that, I had to spend 85 hours grinding Estelle and Joshua one experience at a time all the way up to level 50 because, that's optimal. You want to be as high as level possible. And the EXP scaling means beyond level 41, only the final boss will give you more than one experience, and he gives you 2. And then you hit level 42, and you get 1. So it takes 85 hours to get to the requisite 50,000 experience, I think, grinding optimally.
God.
And then I just started doing New Game Plus runs, and fumbling around in the dark with that. I did that for second chapter. And from there, I started looking around online. I had a friend who was more proficient at navigating Nico than myself. So I asked him to look around on that website to see if he could find any Japanese trail speed runs. And he was able to, and he was able to find notes and videos for some. And I was like, all right. So I started hand translating the routes via Google Translate. Most of the time without a video. So if something was wrong, I had no way of knowing it was wrong until things didn't work out. And that's just kind of how I got into runs.
Those were the dark ages.
Now I'm just thinking.
You say the dark ages, but it's literally what I did for Reverie a year ago. So
that was one of the first pinned documents in the Trail speedrun server, as I remember, was one of the Japanese notes from Cold Steel 1. That was a much longer. I
translated that route too.
Yeah, it was a much longer speedrun when that game first came out than it is now, because PC has both faster loads and turbo.
Well, we can definitely get into it when we go through the list of games later, hopefully. But The End, or Shinoa, did a huge service in rerouting that game, since the old route was very, at least for the beginning, was very heavy loaded. Like, you would do the money trick with Elliot and Warm Egg Soup to get money, so you could actually buy weapons and armor, survive Greninja. And Shinoa was able to route all of that out and has done amazing work for all of the Cold Steel games when it comes to actually making them way faster than they were on the Japanese routes.
Yeah.
Let's hear from you, Schtolteheim. What is it that got you interested in speedrunning this series?
I think my story is similar to a lot of people's, in that people will find a way to speedrun their favorite game, regardless of what kind of game it is. I think that's the sort of thing that compels a lot of RPG speedrunners. They play these games either as kids and get inspired for the sake of nostalgia, or it's just really good and it strikes a chord with them in the moment. And I think that's that's the origin story for a lot of us. We get really inspired and we decide, I want to go back to this game. I want to experience it in a different light. For me, Sky Third is my favorite game in the series and one of my favorite games in general. So that really inspired me to go back through the game, learn the speed run, and speed through it as fast as I could.
Makes sense. And then James?
Let's see. I want to say I don't want to say just like anyone twist my arm on this, but it was like kind of like what Schultz said, and just to kind of being there in the trail server in general. Because, originally I came to the trail server back in late 2019 when Schtolteheim was setting up one of our first Falcom RTAs.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It was at that same time I actually decided to play the trail server games casually because they'd been sitting in my backlog forever because, oh, hey, they're on sale on Steam. I'll play it eventually. And then I got to eventually. And, because there was that period between 2019 2020 where I just went through Sky FC to Cold Steel 3.
Yeah,
And-
that's one of those journeys it's interesting because you can, when it goes on sale, first chapter is like $10 on Steam. And one of the hardest things with this series in general, I think for a lot of people, is just going to that game on Steam and clicking play, because
It's
kind
a
of
little dated. It's a little slow.
I mean, there is that,
yeah.
but it's mostly just the
This-
fact that by now the series is a bit more of a known commodity. So
Yeah.
people are like,
It's
if I start this now, we're up to 10 games in English, not even counting Naruto.
Yep.
You've got 700 of hours.
You have
through.
a daunting
A lot of
commitment
time.
ahead of you.
What's funny is that mostly vanishes for the most part once you get to the back-breaking cliffhanger at the end of FC, and then you're just like, oh, I'm addicted now. I'm going
That
to buy
is-
every single game on the Steam store.
That
The
is-
amount of people I know who have gotten to the end of FC and it's like, well, all right, I guess I'm downloading
Yep.
second chapter right now and starting it on stream. Let's go,
Dude.
guys.
It happened to Oro, and that's hilarious to me because
Oro
several
was-
years ago we commissioned Oro for stream overlays and artwork for Falcom RTA, and at the time he knew nothing about the Trails series. I just showed him some conceptual art, some key visuals from Cold Steel, and he was like, okay, sure, I'll craft something out of this. A couple of years later, he plays FC, he gets to the ending of FC, and he's like,
Yep. He was not a fan of the game's prologue, and that seems to be a common thing. As I love first chapter for all of its many,
It's definitely a slow burn.
it
I'm
is
lot
a
more
slow burn,
bullish
but it is
on
yeah.
FC than a lot of people because I don't mind the opening that people consider slow because I don't think the game needs world-ending stakes and massive action
it's
right off.
Right.
the
game is
I mean,
just
it's
really
perfectly
chill.
fine.
Yeah, it's a great game. It's just it's a different kind of vibe from a lot of RPGs, including many of the later games in that series. I would say Zero is to some extent as well, although Zero ramps up a little bit faster.
Zero definitely ramps up a little bit quicker with its
Yeah.
prologues, with
also-
introducing the whole Mafia and Crossbell problems and the complex situation it's in.
It's also just the shortest one of the bunch, which kind of helps it along.
As a speedrun, first chapter is it's also sort of that slow burn. It's got really awkward pacing to it as a speedrun. Because it's really, really cutscene heavy. And there's really it's droll as a speedrun to me. It's not there's not a whole lot of variety with it. It's not a whole lot of really interesting maneuvers like a lot of the later games, even second chapter has. It's just kind of it's bland to me, and maybe that's because I did too much New Game Plus, where like everything didn't matter.
Maybe.
Yeah,
Maybe it's
that'll
because I've just played too much of it. It's just it's not my favorite. Not my favorite as a speedrun.
I do think it has its merits. I don't think I will say it's my least favorite speedrun of the trilogy, partially just because of the differences between keyboard, mouse, and controller, which I'm sure we'll get into later.
In any case, to finish up real quick, but yeah, I played through those, and like I said, I kind of felt like I should do something since it was there in the server, but I don't have a lot of free time generally, and I also have some low-key health problems that make it difficult for me to sit for long periods of time. So with the game's length as they were, I was hesitant to get into the speedrun. But then Sky FC got into Limit Break 22, and I sat in on that on commentary. And although I was a bump on the log for that, I had a really great time that night. And I finally decided, you know what, I'm going to sit down, and these may end up being weird, but I'm going to sit down and I'm actually going to learn these games now. And here we are.
Yeah. It is admittedly one of those funny moments that I was the one who started the server. I haven't actually run any of the games. I love joining you guys for stuff like hosting these events anyway.
I mean, we've made you do a couple fights, and we're gonna hopefully continue that trend.
I have, yes, I have.
I would make you do. Never mind.
No.
Spoiler. Got to keep it a secret.
Yes, yes, but I have worked with a lot of these fellows through East, which I also admin the East server, and that's a series I actually run about half of the games. So. Speaking of running a whole bunch of the games and Beef talking about not his favorite. So Beef, you have run basically every English translated Trails game so far. You've also done all except for Naita. You've also done so basically all in a row. So tell us a little bit about Solo no Kiseki.
So Solo no Kiseki was a challenge to me that was inspired by watching some other people do series runs where they sit down, they run the entire series of speed runs back to back. I know there's people who've done it for Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Zelda, and a bunch of other series. And I was like, hey, I know all of these Trails runs. I want to try this for Trails. So that was my goal, basically run every single Trails game back to back to back to back to back to back times 10 in one or two sittings. One sitting was a little ambitious for it because it is very lengthy, but two sittings is still a bad time, but it's doable.
I mean, how many variations? Go ahead.
Yeah, this past in 2023 and even partway the end of 2022, most of all of my gaming and streaming was Trails runs in preparation for a Solo no Kiseki in August. And was it August? It started September. Yeah, and September. Labor Day weekend. And we went through all 10 games, including Reverie, which had just come out a month before, in 40 hours.
Yeah. Needless to say, this is one of those types of streams that you have a don't try this at home, kids, because this is a bad idea.
It is that's how Beef got his reputation as a cryptid.
I mean, maybe that's how I got the reputation as that Trails guy.
Yeah, just a little devil on your shoulder saying, "Do this dumb thing."
No. See, that's how it starts too. Is sometimes like when you're going through decision making in your day to day, your common sense is there, and your ego is there, and they're like, "No, don't do these really dumb one-off ideas you just thought of. Have restraint." But then there's those one or two ideas that slip through the cracks that just keep incessantly bugging.
Anyway.
And eventually you're like, yeah, this is entirely feasible. This is possible. Here's how I would execute it. Here's how I do it. I could do this. And then all of a sudden you're just like, I'm going to do it.
Yeah. I mean, that's
kind of how blindfolded dogs came into be for the Sky First Chapter run.
And I mean, you sort of specialize in long-distance marathon runs to boot, don't you? Like, I know you do a few other really long runs, like you do Shin Megami Tensei 4, you do
I used to do... Games. I've definitely gotten out of it, and I've lost a lot of the stamina for it, but when I was in college, in my early days of streaming and speedrunning, since I've been at this for a decade, I was definitely doing a lot of SMT runs, which were 7, 8. Nothing was really shorter than 7 hours, except for like Digital Devil Saga. The times have since come way down, and they are much faster then. And with SMT5 Vengeance coming, I will be going back to SMT runs for that.
That's going to be interesting to see, because I know that game's finally getting moved out of the Switch. And I know the Switch version has a bunch of glitches, but it is also a game that I was like, wouldn't it be nice if this could be run on PC at like actual, frame rate and loading times? Yeah,
so we definitely can't get into that too much because it's not even about this conversation. But I will tell you that in Persona 3 Reload, the new Persona 3 game, that's just a remaster, alt-tabbing on PC works to skip mini-bosses as a frame advance skip. And that's the exact technique we use in SMT5 on Switch to do all the glitches. So it's more than likely going to work in Vengeance, though.
Interesting.
Yeah. PC optimization on that topic has been a real boon for the Trails series.
Oh, yeah.
Over the last few years, many of the games that were previously trapped on older systems have been ported and released on PC, and that's been a big help. Like Azure used to be 8 hours, and now it's
7.5. 7.5. Now it's 4.5, 420-ish. With modified turbo, if you were doing full turbo, it'd probably be 330-ish. Save another hour there.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of one of the big things with Cold Steel as well. So the original route, as far as I'm aware, was like normal on PS3 was the faster of the two consoles, because that game originally only launched for PS3 and PlayStation Vita.
I don't know who ran PS3, but I ran PS3. I ran on PS TV, and it was a long boy. It was up there with Persona. It was up there with SMT games. It was 7-8 hours.
Yeah. So for comparison, I believe the first run we could ever find proof of was about 8 hours on PS3 for Cold Steel 1. The first run of that category that I think I'd seen in normal was when Cent did it at like the 6.5 hours for normal difficulty. So an hour and a half cut just from moving from PS3 to PC in real time.
Yeah, when I did a full turbo run the day of CS1 PC release, and it was like 4.5 hours. It's since now gotten down to like, I think full turbos are on the 2-hour mark. Modified turbos in the 3-hour range, and that was because of the major route changes and optimizations that came its way.
Yeah. So you said modified turbo. You want to just give kind of a brief rundown of what that entails?
So modified turbo is my child. It's something I have created to be sort of the barrier between full turbo, which I don't enjoy, and no turbo, which generally gets into those really long length runs. It allows you to use turbo for the cutscenes and the battles of the games, but not for the field movement. And that really creates a dynamic where your movement is really important. Cutting corners, knowing how to interact with the geometry, running past enemies efficiently becomes way more important. Whereas on turbo, if you're going as fast as you can, it's near impossible to try to optimize that stuff. There's some people like Mikan who can do it because he's just an absolute monster. But all the respect to him, by the way, he's fantastic.
Turbo runners are
different.
Very interesting folk.
Yeah.
You say it's a barrier to full turbo. DoeWolf has gotten over it.
We're going to be saying get over the barrier at least a couple times, I assume.
Get over the barrier.
Yep. So, yeah, and part of it is, as far as I remember, is there's actually a lot of glitches that are specific to turbo.
Yep, there's a lot of frame dependent and turbo dependent. Like Sky, you can either use you can use a hard coded turbo to break out of dialogue triggers and go to the end of the game very quickly. Presumably, you can do the same in second and third chapter, but we haven't really done anything with that. the new tech in Zero is to change your frame rate down to 30 FPS. That allows you to 6 times turbo straight through the trigger right before the tutorial of the game even, and go straight to the third final dungeon of the game and beat it in 29 minutes is Mikan's time. Ridiculous.
Falcom and FPS shenanigans are a match made in Gehenna.
Yeah, CS1, there's really not too much. CS2, you can use 60 FPS and 6 times turbo, 60 FPS or lower to go out of bounds anywhere you want with Reen. Cold Steel 3, before they patched it literally a week ago, we downpatch now for runs, you could use 60 FPS and turbo with assault attacks, Reen, Yuna, Kurt to get out of bounds anywhere you want. And then CS4 and Reverie are where they kind of fix things so that we can't do dumb things.
Yeah, although it's only a matter of time. As somebody who's been running the East game since...
We just need we need our own Jabo.
Yeah, we need our own Jado. Well,
I mean, Jado's worked Nayuta. Maybe he'll transition to Trails.
We'll see.
It is the
Get
gateway
him to
game.
the ending of FC so that he gets addicted to the series.
I'm pretty sure he's played like up till like Cold Steel 1 or something. It's just a matter of playing the just a matter of, deciding to touch on the speed run. So for anyone unfamiliar, Jado is a very kind and chill person, and we love him. But I gave him the nickname in the East Discord of Raging Bull, which is the name of a character from East 9, because he is like a bull in a china shop when it comes to significant skips in speedruns. He has broken half of the East series by himself between finding several of the big skips in East Felghana that save almost like half an hour to multiple things that he's broken in East 9 to absolutely shattering East 8, finding several RTA viable skips in East 7, which I think he is the only person who has done the turbo any % run without turbo, to give you an idea of how nuts his abilities are with that game. So, very cool person, but also very much somebody who breaks stuff. If you've ever seen the Pokemon Brilliant Diamond speed run, that's like 19 minutes. He had a hand in breaking that game for perspective.
I also mentioned Mikan in my explanation. Mikan is a Japanese trails runner that he's in our community Discord. He's kind of just lurks in there. I've seen him type a few times. But he has been really the one who did a lot of the routing for a lot of the games. A lot of the routes that I've translated, Zeros, Azures, CS3s, I think CS4, they've all been Mikan's route. That man is an absolute wizard when it comes to routing Trails games, because there's so many options in a Trails game that it's crazy how well he has been able to narrow down, isolate, and optimize the correct and fastest ones.
Yeah. That's something that really amazes me about Trails speedruns, Sky especially, because in addition to, stats, levels, equipment, the standard RPG fare, you have orbments, which are kind of reminiscent of like Final Fantasy VII's materia. You plug them into characters and it gives them special abilities. But on top of that, in Sky especially, they give you elemental points, and those are used to unlock your spells. So not only do you get stat bonuses, like if you equip an attack quartz, it boosts your attack, it also gives you elemental points toward fire spells. And there are tons and tons and tons of different combinations and things you can unlock that the sheer wizardry it requires to sift through all these different options and find the most optimal one is what I really appreciate the most about Trails speedruns. Sky Third especially has been a massive community effort because we're constantly finding new things about that game. We're finding new things to optimize, new items to pick up, new quartz combinations to set. The world record for modified turbo, or as it's also called, mixed turbo, has gone down like 45 minutes.
Yeah, 45-ish minutes in about 6 months, because we knew we wanted to submit it for Limit Break. So we finally, Third was a run filled with strategies that were very reminiscent of first and second chapter. And this kind of goes into general how Sky works as a speedrun as a whole. Where Sky speedrunning is, there's not really a whole lot of quick kills or really interesting blow the enemy up right away kind of strategies, because you're just not that powerful. You don't have all the damage stacking modifiers that you might have in later games. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the strategies are kind of just hit the enemy with damage until it dies, which by necessity means you're interacting with the fight. You're trading blows, you're taking damage, you're tanking hits, you're going back and forth with your turns. Your enemies are getting turns, they're moving. You can't control how they move. You can't control the turn order. You don't have visibility into delay numbers, meaning you can't really optimally plan how the turn orders are going to work out. And Third had a lot of that. And being the ultimate game for Sky, where the numbers are bloated and very large, it gets out of hand very quickly. A lot of what we've been doing the past 6 months for Third in preparation for getting it into Limit Break 2024 is I sat down and went through a lot of the really troublesome fights where it was like, okay, we're trading blows. Things can go super wrong here. There's no real strategy. It's just do damage until something dies. And what we've turned it into is something way more akin to actually that of Zero, Azure, and Cold Steel, where we're able to go into a fight, and as long as we have the right turn order, which we have some minor control over, we can instantly end the fight, because we actually were able to route out ways where we have the damage and the additional modifiers to just blow a fight to smithereens without it actually even interacting with it.
Yeah, being able to find a win condition is a very important thing for a lot of those fights. There are still like 1 or 2 fights that can go off the rails no matter how much you prepare. Mm-hmm. I would know that. It has happened a lot.
I mean, who hasn't?
That is the beginning of many.
Freaking Cassius, dude.
That is the origin story of a lot of. That is the origin to a lot of stories in speedrunning. Is I made a mistake this one time and things did not work out.
It's not even making mistakes. Cassius just bullies me.
Yeah. But Mannix has also been a huge help on that. He's kind of doing his own route separate to mine. And we conclude on a lot of things. Like, he's got strategies that like I don't feel are worth it, but might be technically safer. They might be technically slower because you're doing more menuing. But one of the things we really, really look for in Trails speedruns as a whole is consistency. We want consistent strategies that allow us to get through the boss fights and the encounters without, having things go wrong. Mm-hmm. And the more fights we can get that consistency on, the faster the game is going to be. Because even with Turbo, like you have to think about it. Just by making the fights consistent in Sky Third, that's what saved the vast majority of that 45 minutes we've shaved off the times. And that's with the battles going 6 times as fast, by the way. Like, the battles are so fast to begin with, and we still shaved 30 minutes off of them by making them consistent.
Yeah, it really helps when you can turn the fight into a flowchart.
I mean, obviously,
while battles do go 6 times faster, you still have to spend time to think. Mm-hmm. Like, your menu actions are still as fast as you can physically process them. And though the effects, the animations are faster, you still have to execute. And being able to execute faster still matters a lot with respect to Turbo.
And you lose a lot of that time to think about your execution because the animations are so quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, if your fingers aren't moving the whole time, it's definitely a lot. Like I've routed a couple of games myself. I've run on the Limit Break channel, like Breath of Death 7, which is like a 30-minute run, and the game's animations can be just absolutely skipped through. So it's like any time lost in that game, I know is just it is the amount of time it takes to think on what to do next and then actually inputting it in. So some of those are actually, like, I know some people like volatility with their RPG speedruns, but some of the most fun RPG speedruns to run are the ones where it's like you have an answer to everything. It's just you need to mentally figure out as quickly as possible, like, okay, so this happened, therefore I need to respond with this. Like just menuing and playing like that is, menuing is one of the purest forms of skill in speedrunning. So I think
it really
it's really
is.
Cool. I think it's really cool when a run comes down to how quickly can you get the inputs in.
And that's
like
definitely the case.
Sounds like you'd enjoy the 10-minute long menu in third then.
Well, we should cover that actually, because we haven't really talked about the quirks of Sky, and there's definitely a lot of them. The most major one I think we can all agree on is how dead timey the menus are. When you select an action in the menu, you are locked out of inputs for what feels like seemingly so long.
Oh yeah.
And it, like, you might think, like, when you watch a Skyrun, it's like, why aren't they menuing faster? And the real reason is because the game won't let us. And part of that is abated by mouse and keyboard, but also part of it is, in my opinion, strictly because of mouse and keyboard. Because even when you're not using mouse and keyboard, when you go through a menu, the game is forcibly moving your mouse to where it wants it to be, because mouse and keyboard is always an option. I feel like if it didn't do that, the menus would be faster.
It's very strange. And that pretty much segues us into the difference between controller and keyboard mouse.
You two and your arguments over what to run.
It's really just a matter of preference. I accept fully that controller is way slower, because it is. That's just a simple fact. Mouse and keyboard is faster, but it's not as enjoyable for me to run, so I don't do it. I take the time loss.
Yeah, and honestly, that is one of my favorite things about the Falcom speedrun community. The fact that we afford people the freedom and comfort to run games however they want to. We don't really put much stock into the absolute fastest time or objective head-to-head times, like comparing me and Beef. Our runs are not inherently comparable because we run the games in two completely different ways. And that's fine.
Yeah.
We have no problem with that.
There's also a ton of inconsistencies with how the games themselves actually run between PC to PC, so it's hard to compare regardless, even with a load remover.
Yeah, it helps. I mean, the category of modified turbo, which I know is one that's kind of become a little bit more popular within the community, is kind of so arbitrary by definition that it's just like people run these games how they want, and I think that's really cool. There's a very relaxed vibe of wanting to help, people learn the runs and trying to optimize these games how we can, but isn't super hinged around just getting, what is the absolute best time that we can get in any of these given games. I mean, obviously that's, improving your time is like a big motivation for speed running, but it's not like, it's not as competitive in terms of vibe. And I think that's kind of helps really foster like a very friendly community.
Yeah. I mean, the restriction in mixed turbo that you can't turbo on the field, there's nothing actually preventing you from doing that. We just use honor system.
Yeah, and if you accidentally do it, because we can segue into that discussion. You just spin around in a circle for a second. You kill all your momentum, and you just continue on with your life.
You just go oops and sit there for a second.
Yeah, it's yeah, it is definitely one of the more arbitrary kinds of things, and different communities have kind of their different ways of handling that kind of thing. So
yeah, I in some other communities, there's a massive push for optimization, especially with respect to things like hardware. Like on PS2 runs, everybody wants the 90K PS2s because they're the fastest, and everybody wants to get the best controllers and the best hardware and software setups to push the time down as far as possible.
Put your NES on a hot plate.
Oh, God.
We're not doing Dragon Quest III here, Beef.
Yeah, we're just happy if anyone wants to run these games.
Yeah,
like I said,
it's more about improving yourself.
Yeah, we have a lot of people in the server. We don't have a ton of runners, so we're always looking for more people. I say, as I don't run any of the trails. I run enough east, therefore
we do
east is basically trails anymore.
Okay, but should we figure out if Cold Steel 3 runs faster on Switch if we put the Switch on a hot plate?
Oh God,
no.
I don't think it'll ever run faster on Switch. It's the Switch.
Yeah, it might be 80%. It might get to 80% of a PC run.
But
put your PC on a hot plate.
Yeah, you do try to optimize a little bit. Like some of the other quirks for Sky is specifically one of the reasons why keyboard and mouse is a lot faster is because of text buffering.
Yep. You can buffer
when you go into a cutscene, on controller, you start holding down the cancel button, which is shared with the menu button, so you can't actually hold it down while you're still moving. But on keyboard, those buttons are separate, so you're able to hold down cancel and buffer it going into a scene. And what that allows for is it allows for text to start skipping immediately, since text starts auto-skipping after you've held down the button for a certain amount of time. And you can't do that early on controller, so you inherently eat some time lost there because of that.
Yeah.
So something I would be interested to ask, because we talked a bit about Solo no Kiseki. What is your favorite Trails speedrun, Steve? And not necessarily just game, but like category as well, because I know you run a few variants of some.
So it used to be Azure Any Percent. Just because that run was routed by Mekon, and it is an absolute marvel of what you can do with that game and how broken it is, despite generally seeming like being one of the most well-balanced Trails games. It's extraordinarily fun. It's super tight in the sense that any missing equipment, any missing quartz, any different speed values, any extra levels, any single error means you just straight up die. It's a very, very tight run, but I think I have to now give it to Trails of Azure 100%, because you get all of that nonsense plus more. Trails of Azure 100% was a joint effort by Matoy and myself, and while they did a lot of the actual routing out of the logistics of the run, where to go, when to get various things, a lot of the fights were cleaned up by myself, and we made that run into basically just a better version of the Azure run as it stood, because there's even more really, really juicy strategies like that like in no world should ever work, that any casual would ever even ponder thinking about. But if you do things just this certain way, it works out perfectly.
Awesome.
What's your favorite, James?
I mean, unfortunately, I've only got two choices since I've only done SC and the third. And I think overall, I would have to lean towards the third, just because, I mean, I know this is a bit weird to use because it's the third. I mean, and don't get me wrong, the third is a very good game. but it is a very, very smooth speed run.
Yeah.
And that is a result of the wrapping changes.
Yeah, I mean, it does.
You would not be saying that 6 months ago.
No, and you cannot. I mean, like, we definitely appreciate all the work you've put into it. I mean, I know we've hassled you a little bit because, like, not just a couple weeks ago.
These guys were trying to learn it, and literally every day for like a week, it was like, hey, there's a new strat.
This guy was cooking up new strats while I was in the final chapter of a run. I made an offhand comment about, hey, it'd be nice if we didn't have to do this, and that popped the light bulb in Beef's head.
I mean, we did Cassius Double Cyclone while I was making a submission video to where I couldn't change up so I could do Cassius Double Cyclone. So
Are
technically,
we really doing Cassius Double Cyclone now?
Yeah, no, Cassius Double Cyclone is free.
Oh, God.
So I technically have an outdated
for nothing.
For anyone unfamiliar with what we're talking about, all you need to know is that's infamously one of the hardest fights in the entire Sky series.
Yeah, Cassius is in third, the hardest fight in any of the Sky speedruns. Because if he wants you dead, you just lose the fight. You can't do anything about it. But we've developed more ways now that he has to work even harder. He has to work even harder to make it so you die.
Watch him S-break me on turn 2 next time I do a run.
You have protection against that.
Thank God.
But yeah, that's a manic strat, and that's sort of kind of like he came up with that strat. We looked it over, and it's like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense to do. It is a lot more menuing, but it makes the fight safe enough to be worth.
I gotta ask, this being a Falcom game, and we've already talked briefly on it, but this is a question that I know I can ask everybody and get any number of different answers. But what is your favorite song or tune from any of the Falcom, or from any of the Trails games?
Whew.
Just any of them. Doesn't have to be a game that you run, because I'm curious to hear some takes on this one.
I have a lot.
Hold on. Let me bring up my music player.
You just go to Spotify, played this song from this game 1,000 times.
While he's doing that, I have a lot of songs that I love from Falcom in general, but I have to give it to Super Arranged Silverwell. I don't think anything is going to top that song for me.
Gosh, they even put that. Well, not the Super Arranged. They put an arranged version in SC and third. And God, I love that song.
No, that was the Super Arranged.
That is
they
Super
put in.
Arranged.
The late Wataru Ishibashi was responsible for a lot of Trails in the Sky's standout tracks, and he just had an incredible talent for melody, for really catchy, earwormy melodies and leitmotifs that really got stuck in your head.
I think for me, it's honestly a tie between Azure Arbitrator and Bad Dream Invasion from Reverie.
Oh, that's a pick out of left field.
It is. It's definitely. It's so hard to pick between them and then Sunshine Coastline and a lot of that's on my tracks. But Bad Dream Invasion is just.
Yeah, I could gush about Falcom's sound team for so long.
I mean, we all could.
So what's your favorite?
For me to say a hard favorite, I don't know, just because I like a lot of stuff and it's hard for me to really super rank stuff, but definitely a favorite song out of the entire series. I've kind of mentioned this to you guys, is Illusionary Blue Flower from Sky to Third.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Shout out to Gato Badora from Brandish 2, the track that indirectly, unironically inspired Megalovania. That's true, by the way.
Yep.
Oh, Yoko Shimomura.
So we've talked a lot about Sky Now, I think we've covered most of our bases there. I think we can discuss a little bit of the Crossbell series, since those games are vastly different from Sky.
Yeah,
I was gonna say if I had to pick, it is impossible for me to pick like a favorite, but I think the song that strikes me the most, and this is gonna be a bit of a different kind of take, but "Fulfilled Feelings" at the end of Zero is just melts my heart every time I hear that dang song. It's like the scene that it plays in is one of my favorite scenes in any, not just game, but just anything. So
it's a good scene. Found you.
Aw. Gonna make me cry on stream just by referencing one of my favorite cutscenes. Go play if for whatever reason you haven't played the Crossbell games like casually, because those were the last ones to come out in English. Finally we had an official release of Zero and Azure in 2022 and 2023. If you haven't played them, if you thought to skip those games, like, even if you've played all the way through Cold Steel and you've been spoiled on some of the stuff before, go back and play those games. They're lovely.
It's my favorite arc in the series. It's my favorite speedrun games in the series. I mean, if you want to get through Zero in 30 minutes, you can do that now.
Speaking of, Zero has had a really funny speedrun history. And I might as well go into that one, because I was indirectly part of the team on that. So Zero and Azure released on PSP back in like 2010 or so. And when Exceed, the first translation company to tackle the Trails series, had the choice of localizing Crossbell or localizing Cold Steel, they picked Cold Steel because it was on the more modern platform and it had the better chance of succeeding. And that left Zero and Azure in limbo for many, many, many years, until the Geofront, a fan translation team, stepped up to release both Zero and Azure as fan translations based on really old PC ports. And eventually, those translations were picked up by NIS America, the modern publishers of the Trails series, for official release just a couple of years ago. And that introduced a bit of a wrinkle, because the original version of Zero, the PSP version, and all versions based upon it, including Geofront's PC fan translation, had a bug called the Get Over the Barrier glitch, where you could clip through certain objects to get areas you weren't supposed to. In the original glitched any % route for Zero, you would clip into the bonus dungeon early, you'd power level to the level cap, and then you'd clip into the final dungeon and kill the final boss. But that was patched in the updated re-release that we just call Kai for short. And
not to be confused with Kai no Kiseki, which is the latest game that's been announced in the series. There's a reason in the server we have the Kai channel, instead of just being called Kai, it's Kai no Kiseki.
Yeah, Kai is sort of the remastered versions of all the games Falcom has put out. Yeah. And the Steam version, while it's just called Trails from Zero and Trails to Azure, those are technically Kai ports. Like, they're ports of the Kai versions rather than the original pace version.
And those ports patched the Get Over the Barrier glitch. So for a couple of years or so, the fastest version of the game, for Zero at least, was a version that you just couldn't get anymore. It was a bit of an awkward spot. But recently, we found a glitch that works on both versions and is even faster than Get Over the Barrier.
Significantly faster at that. Where you now set your FPS to 30 before even going into the tutorial Geofront. That allows you to break through a text trigger. You go to the third final dungeon of the area, do your power leveling from level 3 to level 46 in a single fight, and then you align your plot flags, and you just finish the game from normally from there.
Falcom games are spaghetti.
They quite are.
I will say
they're not, though. That's the thing that's amazing. Is like they are usually so good at making sure you need to have the proper plot flags to do anything. That's why Get Over the Barrier in Azure didn't do anything for us. But there's just sometimes they miss one or two little things, and we find them.
Yeah, I mean, actually, So Schtolteheim jokingly calls them spaghetti. The thing about a lot of them, especially in the E series, is a lot of the times these games are really breakable. But that's just because they tend to have a lot of things going on. And usually if you manage to find the thread that allows you to unravel something, usually it unravels. Like, usually that thread goes on a while and you just, like, break a lot of different things. Like, they're remarkably stable games casually. You're not super likely to find a glitch in a lot of them, and in fact, it's actually even rare to find like a soft lock or a crash, launch East 8 notwithstanding. Like, they've been really good at PC ports and stuff ever since then.
Yeah, the addition of Turbo is really what set a lot of things off, because a lot of the games were never designed to have Turbo in mind.
Yeah,
it's only once you get to Cold Steel 3 and their most recent patch and beyond where they're finally building with Turbo in mind. It's like, oh, we don't want people to go through walls. That's bad.
Yeah,
it's only marginally.
Spaghetti wasn't the right word.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm just too used to working on older Falcom games that legitimately are programming nightmares.
Yeah, they're remarkably stable. They're just also, how do I say it? They're the kinds of things where when you find something that can break them, it tends to have a ripple effect. Like I mentioned with Shadow being the bull in the China shop, usually when he finds something, a whole bunch of other things break thereafter. But remarkably, there are not very many, like, despite how many ways there are to break these games, there's not very many ways to soft lock or hard lock yourself. There's like
there is in Cold Steel 3, but
there are a couple of soft locks that you can make in like East Salsetta, for instance, from just overlapping cutscenes. I assume 8 and 7 have that to some extent. One thing I did kind of want to
has a lot of soft lock potential because of the nature of out of bounds there. If you hit gravity at the wrong time, you're soft locked because gravity is only active when there's a floor under you. So if you're way high up in the sky going through walls in the middle of a fortress, but there's floor under you from other unloaded parts of the dungeon, you'll fall straight through and soft lock. If you use coordinate warp to trigger cutscenes or enter areas before you see the proper, like, oh, you're entering this area for the first time cutscene, the characters are going to talk about it. That soft locks you because that cutscene will no longer play, and then all your plot flags are out the window from there. You can't get them back.
And it kind of, something I would mention is kind of one of the funnier soft locks, because we have talked about Crossbell. So back in the day, and Dolwolf is familiar with this, when Get Over the Barrier glitch is done in a run, there's like a flag, and I think, what is it, like chapter 3 or something, that if you haven't set that, when you go to beat the final boss, the like ending cutscene just starts playing a bunch of scenes, but one of them is of like Crossbell Airport.
Yes.
And so if you haven't ever been to Crossbell Airport, it loads the first scene for when you go to the airport, and then you're soft locked in the airport. So there's been kind of a joking category for like that game called Airport %, which is 20-ish minutes faster on the no turbo category, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, the airport just
cancels the ending.
It's amazing.
Doesn't have to deal with that, presumably because we enter the final chapter as normal, like the intended way, which presumably sets all other plot flags to final chapter state.
Yeah.
Rather than in the Get Over the Barrier route, where you're technically beating the final dungeon in chapter 4 or chapter. Is it chapter 4? I think either 4 or 5. But you're not in that state of actually having gotten to the final end of the game. So things potentially break. More with Crossbell, though, some of the quirks, since Crossbell is definitely the turning point for the series as a speedrun on a whole, We've talked a little bit about the routes of how, you go here and you power level and you're instantly the max level. That's sort of the beginning of the end for the whole system in Sky that we were dealing with, where, you're actually interacting with the fights. Because, when you're close to max level for the majority of the game, your S breaks are one-shotting everything all the way until the final boss. And then you just have to interact with the final boss. Azure's kind of the same way, where a lot of the early game is do damage until it dies, but you're able to do damage so optimally that you're still not interacting with the fight that much. And that trend only gets worse as you go further into the series.
Yeah,
but Crossbell's really sort of the starting point for all of that.
Yeah, Cold Steel, I haven't run those games yet, but Cold Steel, from what I understand, is a lot more S-break heavy and a lot more based on win conditions. And that led you to develop a certain category that you have a soft spot for.
Well, we'll get there. With Crossbell, some of the other quirks is, like Sky, there's a lot of menu delay. It's not as bad. Like, in Solo no Kiseki, when I got out of Sky and I went to Crossbell, I'm like, yes, good menus. And then, like, somebody else picks up Crossbells and is like, oh man, these menus are so laggy. And it's like, you have no idea. Like, the menus are better. You start getting into actual movement techniques, like quick swapping your character after doing an attack to stun an enemy to basically break you out of the attack animation frame lock so you can start moving way before the game expects you to. That's a crucial piece of movement tech that you really can't execute in Turbo because everything's so fast, but in Modified Turbo and No Turbo, it's your bread and butter of how you are actually getting around enemies. It's the Crossbell games are the first games that start that trend.
Yeah, there's quite a variety of just different types of stuff you'll get out of various different speed runs in this series. It's kind of one of the things that's always been interesting to me. Like, I mean, as a casual playthrough, just seeing the way the games have changed, especially when you get to Cold Steel 3 and just how, like, they have added stuff, but they haven't taken away a whole lot. So it's just like, God, this game is so...
You get a lot of mechanics going.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
a lot of the comparing like a casual playthrough to a speedrun playthrough, a lot of the setups we do in literally every single game, like a lot of players, you would never casually set your characters up like that. You would always do kind of more of a balance. It's like, oh yeah, we'll give everybody HP, we'll give everybody attack, we'll give everybody mind. But in speedruns, we're just like, no, you are getting these hyper-specific quirks just so you have this one spell, and that is all you do.
Yep.
A perfect example of that is in our recent third routing. We give Chloe, the worst character at physical DPS, Chloe, a ruby gem specifically to buff her physical attack.
Yep. And we get her a new weapon too.
We specifically pick up her a weapon to get her physical attack strength, and anybody is like, "You're using the best attack gem, your very limited ruby resource on Chloe?" And the answer is just yeah, we are.
Yeah.
That's our win condition against, who was it, Grant?
It's Grant, and honestly, with a ruby, it might even be Kurt now. If you can, we might be able to avoid the damage roll there.
Oh right, I forgot Kurt existed.
Which one?
Yeah, we turn Chloe into a
by my arts, Kurt.
Yes.
By my arts, you will make a new save on normal.
It's your fault for starting on hard.
Shoutouts to Kurt. Fun fact. So the song that's playing on the stream right now is by a user by the name of Expert Novice. That guy is also known as Joe Zija, who does the voice of Kurt in Cold Steel 3.
Oh.
just a fun fact.
Yeah,
that is
also one of the OC Remix admins.
But yeah, it's wild. Like in second chapter, we set up Estelle with a bunch of Earth quartz, which are generally regarded as the worst quartz in the series consistently. But it gets her Titanic Roar in chapter 2. So, we have this bonkers strong spell super early because Estelle can do only one thing, and that is roar. And that's just a staple throughout the first 5 games, all the way through Azure. Once you get the Cold Steel, it really starts becoming, okay, just put on quartz for the stats.
Yeah.
You did an emote for that, didn't you? For Roar Stell.
I did. Well, commission's a strong word, but yes, I have a Roar Stell emote.
If there's if there's one thing that she can do, that is a very appropriate thing for that to be. God, I love Estelle.
Estelle is so good, dude.
You make me want to shout.
It is really sad. She's so bad in the Sky games. She's better in Zero, where you get to play her, and then when you get to CS4 and Reverie, she's actually a complete and utter powerhouse, which is really nice. It's the glow up our girl got in CS4 and Reverie is phenomenal.
I see you posting the emo. Yeah, I don't know. There's something just funny to me about the fact that she's pretty much most of the fan base's favorite character, despite the fact she is the classic JRPG problem of a jack of all stats in a series that those don't do well.
Yeah. It's not even the fact that she's a jack of all stats, because Joshua is also a jack of all stats, and so is Julia, so is Shara.
And they all have better niches.
Out of all of the jack of all stats characters, she's like the D rank one.
She's an 8 of all stats.
It's really rough to be her in Sky. I don't honestly know much about her in Zero, because you get her for so short a time, but we use her in the speedrun, really presumably most of the time, because in the Zero speedrun, since you we haven't really talked about it, resource management in these runs as a whole are extremely tight, because the game obviously expects you to be fighting enemies to get your Sepith to unlock your slots, which allow you to put quartz in there. But we don't fight anything in the speedruns. All we really have are the Sepith chests and boss Sepith, and that is nowhere near enough to get you sufficiently through your orbment grids. Kind of reminiscent of Final Fantasy X, where it's speedrunners is okay, you're getting all these levels, but you don't have the spheres to actually learn anything. Because you're just fighting the bosses. So you speed to what you get. Estelle and Zero, along with Joshua, they come with all of their slots open, a full list of quartz for you to use. It's all top tier quartz. And they're just okay, you may be 7 levels lower than us, but you can do better magic because you actually have slots open.
Yeah. Usually we do some form of grinding in a Trails speed run by farming the series equivalent of metal slimes, which drop a ton of Sepith and levels.
That's only in first chapter, second chapter, and not even in Zero. Not even in Zero. It's only in first and second chapter that we actually do Sepith grinds. Every other game, you basically just use what you get.
Yeah.
Fortunately, third's really nice, and you get to Looking Glass, and it's hey, here's 3,000 of every color. It's yeah, thanks, game.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate that.
They know that in a casual run, you're probably going to have to unlock all slots on all 16 of your characters.
Yeah, we do a single palm fight in Zero, but a single palm fight is 20 all Sepith. It's okay, it's a little bit, but it's not much. A lot of your Sepith in Zero, in regardless of what route you're playing, comes from field killing encounters, which is a new mechanic in the Crossbell games, where if you're significantly over leveled, you can attack an enemy on a field and it'll destroy the enemy instantly, and you'll get all the Sepith for it. And that's sort of how we have to fund our Sepith in both Zero and Azure. Once you get to Cold Steel, though, you're entirely reliant on Sepith chests.
Speaking of Cold Steel,
Yeah, we can get into that now. Cold Steel is a major change for the Trail series as a whole as speedrunning, because you go to that new 3D engine, and that new 3D engine, of course, comes with its very own set of quirks, and every single game for Cold Steel 1, 2, 3, and 4 at least play differently than each other.
Mm-hmm.
For example, when you're doing runs of 1, Cold Steel 1 is back to the formula of first chapter, at least initially for the first 4 chapters or so. You're very much just doing damage until something dies. You do have really strong S breaks, but you kind of have to layer those in with additional other damage, or just the ability to spam S breaks from Elisa, because Blessed Arrow is fair and balanced, very fair and balanced.
Yep.
But like movement wise, you might see a lot of runners, particularly myself, like you might go really wide around a turn, and you're like, why are you not hugging the wall? Why are you taking all those extra steps, streamer? You're not going fast. And like the quirks are with that engine, it's like if you turn too sharply as a character, like if you turn by any other means but then rotating the camera, like if you use your left analog stick to turn, all of your running speed gone. You just lose all of your momentum. So the sharpest you can take a turn is how fast you can scroll the camera. Likewise, in Cold Steel 1, which is unique to it, if you swap characters on using like a shoulder button or whatever the swap character on mouse keyboard is, enemies that have noticed you and are chasing after you, they'll stop. They'll be like, where did you go? I was right behind you or right in front of you, right about to hit you. Where did you go? You're gone. Because it was Falcom's first time with an engine like that. They didn't really think about it's like, oh, we need to have the enemies stay aggroed if they're switching characters.
I'm just thinking of that thing in Tales of Berseria where if you run into a wall, enemies just stop following you. There's so many just fun engines.
It's really strange. But eventually, once you get towards the end of CS1, you kind of get into what I call time stop, which is basically the end state for all Kaseki runs from Azure onwards, where you have this delay system, this time system in these Trails games where when you do an action, you incur a certain amount of delay based off the action and your speed. And it works a lot like FF10, where, you know, heavier actions like your S breaks or your stronger spells have longer delay values. And then you have other attacks with smaller delay values, or like waiting in place or using an item that looks like you get your turn back faster. So after you take an action, time basically advances. The game ticks down to delay one by one until the next person gets their turn. They do their action, delay starts ticking again, so on and so forth. But with time stop, that's you as a player getting the game into a state where all of your actions are taking 0 delay at a time. And you can do that by using Burst in Azure. Your S breaks, well, they incur themselves, technically interrupt turn order and give you a 0 delay action. The big one in Cold Steel is Chrono Burst, which gives you 2 actions in a row.
Yep.
Good old chrono loops.
Good old delay cheese.
Yeah, that's another thing, is eventually the absolute delay in CS4 and beyond. But it getting into that delay 0 state is really your win condition. And sometimes you do that from the very first action of the fight. There's fights in Azure, the final boss in Azure 100%. We let time advance a single time. One time, that delay goes from some number to whatever it is to our next turn for the entire fight. Because we're just in a delay 0 state for the entirety of the boss battle. And that's really what Cold Steel devolves into once you get Chrono Burst, because you're using Chrono Burst on Elisa, you're using Chrono Burst with Emma, you're using Chrono Burst with Sharon.
to basically have your CP batteries exchange their CP for your damage dealer CP at a 1-to-4 exchange rate. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
If I may ask, what is your favorite of the 4 cold steels to run then, Beef? I would assume 3, considering Icecraft
It's 3. It's by far 3.
Oh dear.
So
just listening to Ank talk about that game.
Yeah, so 3, as in any percent run, is more delay 0, more S break spam. Everything dies to your S breaks. When I saw that game, I was like, I don't want more of this. I'm so used to this in Cold Steel 1. I'm so used to this in Cold Steel 2. I want something different. And CS3 is unhinged in how broken it is, in the sense that besides, just going out of bounds wherever you want, like that, not even counting that, the way some of the mechanics in that game work allow you to get very close to a delay 0 state or a time stop state extremely early on, by stacking delay reductions on your orbit setup, by continually having your delay and using a very low cost spell. Instead of incurring 15 delay for casting Aqua Bleed, you're incurring 2. And that means you can use the Divine Song Brave Order for instant cast arts to enable that delay 0 state, but it is more like a delay 2 state. But when an enemy's action incurs 40 delay, you can fit in 20 casts before it gets another turn. It's almost like you're in a delay 0 state. And later on into the run, once you get to Chapter 3, you fully get that delay 0 state where your casts are instant, and then you've halved your delay so much that once it gets to 0.5, the game rounds it down to 0, so you properly enter that delay 0 state. And from there, you can think of that as just having infinite turns.
All right.
Which is really what every single Cold Steel run is about, is how fast can we get infinite turns?
Yep. Lovely. So, with that all having been said, so we're up to Reverie in English, and coming out, I think in summer of this year, is going to be Trails to Daybreak, also known as Kudo, as we sometimes call it. Sometimes we still call things by the Japanese names. From what I understand, it's going to be a different engine, and they've changed up the systems a bit. Is there anything y'all are looking forward to with that game? I mean, casually or speedrun-wise?
Sorry. I think it's going to be interesting to juggle the 2 battle systems they've got, because they're trying to do a hybrid sort of thing, where you have one system that's strictly turn-based, like the previous games in the series, and then there's also an Ys-esque hybrid action battle system, where you've got, basic attacks in real time. Kind of reminds me of, like, a more evolved implementation of field attacking in Crossbell and Cold Steel. So I don't know which system the run itself uses. I'm going to assume it uses the turn-based system, because that's probably more broken. But it's going to be interesting to play through that casually and just get a feel for what they're going for.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding is I could be totally off base, but you usually only get the action system for, like, trash mobs. You don't really get it for bosses.
Yeah, that's my understanding
in a
too.
speed run, you would only be really fighting the bosses. I have a small amount of base knowledge from the run. I don't know the run yet, but as far as I know, it's really kind of a RNG heavy run right now, where you're really, really reliant on either turn order working out, you're reliant on damage rolls working out, or you're reliant on turn bonuses being in your favor in order to win some of the boss fights. That's really the extent of my knowledge on it, but I'm really hoping that once it does come out, as we always have as a community, we go in there and we find those consistencies. We find Shinoa works his magic and suddenly we have a run that's 45 minutes faster and completely consistent like you did with Reverie.
I would not be surprised if Daybreak gets the Sky Third treatment when it comes out in English.
It almost certainly will, just because there's going to be so many more eyes on it compared to the 3 or 4 that are on it now, or 3 or 4 pairs. Casually, they debuted the engine for Kuro at the end of Reverie, and in the final cutscene of the credits, and it's like, man, playing a whole game like that, it's awesome. The
screen
feels
transition
so smooth compared to how Cold Steel feels.
Yeah, I remember seeing the promotional material where they go through a door and it's not a fade to black. It just goes straight into the room on the other side of the door.
Yeah,
like,
practically loadless.
Yeah, that's another thing about some of the PC versions, specifically with Cold Steel. The difference in the load times alone, the difference between Cold Steel 1 PC and Cold Steel 1 PSTV is 4 hours. 4 hours of load screens.
Yep.
Yep.
That's one of my favorite fun facts about those 2 runs.
Blusterante.
And somebody had to figure out that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Durante, and your invaluable hard work.
That is another part. Is the ports for these games receive a lot of love, and we have people in our speedrunning Discord who literally work for Nisa or Durante, and we've asked them for things, and we've actually gotten them, which is phenomenal support for us. It means a ton to me personally, and let alone the community, that hey, we're able to ask for these really, really minor enhancements, and we actually get them.
We're so spoiled, dude.
We are. We are
Completely.
really spoiled. Likewise, though, when we find errors, they tend to try to fix them as they should. But one of our main issues with the high ports for Crossbell that came out was man, this text feels so much slower than the Geofront versions because the way the text skipping worked was completely different. And what they did was they added a experimental hidden fast text option for us that makes it now even faster than the Geofront because we mentioned it. And it was just wow, you didn't have to, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was for payment for fixing Get Over the Barrier.
Yeah.
I don't know, though. Without fixing Get Over the Barrier, we might not have found the better one.
There are still some major inconsistencies with load times in particular on the PC ports, where some days you'll just load slow, some days you won't. It kind of sucks. We don't necessarily have a load remover for all the games, but generally how I start off my runs is I load 2 or 3 saves from different parts of the game, so just cache it all into the memory, and then I actually start my run to try to reduce load times. And doing that has saved me minutes on runs. Cold Steel 3's intro is night and day if you load a file beforehand. I think the from starting the timer from hitting new game to getting even visual, not even control, just a visual of the first cutscene, it's 16 seconds if you don't load a file. If you load a file, it's 3. Ridiculous.
Yeah, I want to say this came up in chat. I want to say it's just kind of something about how the games tend to be cached, because East 9 has that problem where every time you start doing runs for a day, you want to load several areas, mainly the really big.
That's something that Durante confirmed that he does in the PC ports. They allocate a certain amount of memory toward just storing level information and map information, and that pool gradually fills as you play through the game until it reaches a max. So yeah, the way to handle that is to just load a bunch of stuff into memory beforehand.
Or just use load removers. That works too.
Yeah, load removers.
I guess.
So, I guess since we're at this point, we want to open up to any questions from the chat. Had quite a few throughout, and I suppose we've answered a few. But if anyone has any questions they want to ask our runners here, so y'all have submitted Sky the Third to this year's RPG Limit Break. We don't know yet whether it's going to get in.
Yeah,
I'm not even on the games committee, so I don't have access to that information. Hold on. My chair has this problem where it likes to sink. But yeah, so we'll find out for sure on March 17th when the schedule releases.
Yep. And
looking forward to seeing that.
In addition to Sky Third, we also submitted Zero. We submitted the new any percent route for that. And James submitted East 2 with Freedom Pulse.
Yeah. We submitted both.
Don't we have like two versions of Zero we've got submitted?
Yeah, Doolwolf
the glitched
submitted
and
the
not super glitched. The
glitch version. I submitted the normal glitchless any percent. So I phrased mine specifically as like, hey, this is a backup, because I would love for both to get in, but the trend of doing one per year is kind of working out for us.
Yeah,
so I'm hopeful it gets in, because it has been transformed into such an amazing run now.
Yeah.
Going back to the loads for a second there too, with Cold Steel 3 in particular, the glitches we do in the run actually cause error messages to pop up at one point, and I've done some messing around with those error messages, and they actually cause the game to have a memory leak if you trigger too many of them, to the point where like it starts really slowing down and eventually crashes, because it's trying to load so many characters that don't exist into all of those memory slots that it can't actually process the rest of the game.
Oh, Trail's having too many characters.
Oh.
Well, no, it's because you only really get to that state when you can trigger those error messages at will. If you trigger it like 20 times at will, and you're trying to load hundreds of characters as a result of that, it's obviously going to break.
Yeah, that's just going to be the final game in the series right there.
I mean,
Trails of White.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Everybody's just going to all 200 playable characters are going to file into the final boss room. Everybody's going to give their like 3 lines that are just slight variations of each other, and then I don't know, whoever the gariest stew is of them all is going to say,
Rain.
"All right,
it's going to be Rain."
Time for my big anime speech."
I mean, just 10 minutes of people walking into the room. I mean, 10 minutes at least.
It's my turn. It's my turn. It's my turn. It's my turn.
I'm here too.
Now I'm just, of all things, that just reminds me of that image of when we ran It's Our Revolution on the Limit Break channel, an RPG Maker game. You just have like a building where you walk in one side of the building and you walk out one side of the building, and you have so many party members that like as you're walking out of the building, you're watching like the back end of your party members walking into the building. We're gonna become that game at some point.
Yeah.
It's a good thing they did away with the conga lines then. So that is actually something we didn't mention about Sky and Crossbell, is famously in those games you've got your conga line of characters. In Sky, if any of your characters get hit, you get into an encounter, which makes your movement maneuvering around enemies a lot more difficult. It used to be that way in Crossbell, but with the Kai versions, one of the things they legitimately marketed them as having is the ability to turn off the conga line encounters. That was like one of the staple features Falcom marketed the Kai games as having for Crossbell, was like, you can turn off trailing encounters. And
their audience.
It feels so good to turn them off, because it's just
that was actually integral to the speedrun route at some point, wasn't it?
No, yeah. For the current glitches run, you cannot do the current glitches strats for the palm grind without turning off trailing encounters.
God.
So we made that feature a speedrun feature. It was fantastic. Like, not only does it save us time in like actually maneuvering around enemies and avoiding encounters, it is part of a strategy now that otherwise wouldn't be possible.
So speaking of strats, I do got a question for you. What is your favorite individual strat of any runs in the series?
That really boils it down to what's your favorite fight, right?
That works too. Unless you have like a glitch something, if you want to kind of like get over the barrier or something.
That's a tricky one. I want to say Dalmor dogs, because as much as I don't like FC's run as a whole, the Dalmor dogs fight is just ridiculous.
It is a really good fight. That for those who may remember the 2022 Limit Break run, that was the fight we did blindfolded.
Yeah, because and the fact that you can do it blindfolded is just ridiculous.
It's one of the only fights in the series, for Sky at least, once you get the ability to hear voices of the characters when it's their turn, blindfolded stuff becomes a lot easier, obviously. You actually have a sound cue to work off of. But in Sky, it's one of the only fights that's like not 1 or 2 actions long that's actually even possible blindfolded.
Yeah.
For me, I think it's gotta be one of the Azure 100% fights, either the Uranus Bell chest fight or the Arios fight in Mishilam. The Uranus Bell chest fight is us doing an encounter that is 60 levels higher than us without taking damage. Because we routed money so specifically that we are able to afford an evergreen for that fight to make Lloyd a really good dodge tank. And then the whole gimmick on that fight is like all of the enemies, you're facing 6 of them, and they're really fast. All of them have impede on their normal attacks, so you can't use arts. And the way we deal with that is by using arts anyways.
Nice.
We use a combination of stealth to keep Ellie and Tio stealth so they can't get hit by impede, and then Strike Bell to actually get Tio's casts off so that we can deal damage. It takes three Genesis Floods to be able to do that, and the strat only works because we buy French fries at the beginning of the run to give to Ellie for a speed up bonus. It is the only time in the entirety of Trails speedrunning Beyond Zero where we're actually using a speed up buff.
Nice.
Because usually they're just not worth it. And then the Arios fight is one of my favorites because we have Ellie and Tio there, and it's like, yeah, Ellie's your caster, Randy's your fizz, Lloyd's your dodge tank, Tio's your magic. And we were like, okay, how can we make this work? And we were just hitting a wall. We just didn't have enough damage on that fight to do it quickly and consistently in a single burst. And what we ended up doing was we turned Randy, the physical DPS guy, the guy who has the worst arts out of all the characters, into a caster.
Oh,
with Crimson Ray, the strongest fire spell, without even using his fire slot. Like, he's got a forced fire slot. We completely ignore it and set up the fire quartz in different positions, avoiding it entirely. And
I think that just says more about how overpowered magic is in Azure.
I mean, yes.
He ends up being a stronger caster than Ellie is because of it. It's so silly.
That's so good. That's so good.
I was prepared for you to say a stronger caster than a physical attacker, but stronger than Ellie?
Ellie, rounding 100% has always... Every single strategy that I changed at 100% was, what if we don't use Ellie when use someone different instead? Every single fight, I swear to God, it was so bad. And even Noelle, it's like, what if we use Noelle?
I like how happy y'all...
That's probably one of my favorite strategies for that one.
I like how happy y'all were in that channel when you were like, oh my god, we finally have a strat for Noelle that, like... makes her useful in this.
She got 2 huge glow ups. She got to be used for the Shirley fight instead of being dead, which is a pretty big difference. And then we specifically bring her for Orko's Tower because we haven't used her all game. She's lower level, which gives her more Master Quartz experience that we would have lost because we're higher level 100%.
And then, so James, do you have any favorite strats of the games you've run?
Oh, I mean, that one's kind of hard because I genuinely have not thought about it, and because plus, thanks to Beef, because I've only run SC in the third, we generally have those consistent fights. So I don't know if I would conventionally say this if I were to really think about it, but I'm going to say probably the Cassius fight in the third, just because, I know, like Beef said, if Cassius wants you dead, you're dead. But that is kind of one of the fights where you have to also just kind of try and react. It's one that, we've done what we can to keep it consistent, and I'm speaking out a little bit because, like I said earlier, I've not yet sat down and done the double cyclone strat yet, so I'm not sure how much safer that is. But, it's just kind of fun and where you've got to roll with it.
I was hoping you were going to say the Reese cookie strat, because that's a good strat, too.
I thought about saying that. I mean, because that is definitely the queenly cookie, but I also don't want to say Evil Reese because I don't want to spoil folks before we get there.
There are so many wacky strats in third.
There really are. It's going to be. I really hope it gets in because it is going to be a delightful run for you all to watch. All the wacky things we do.
Yeah, I hope we manage to get in.
I'm feeling good.
We'll see what the schedule looks like later next month. Actually,
in a few weeks.
It is still February as of now. But with that, we could talk for just all sorts of time. This is like a series of a dozen games that if you play them all the way through and do everything in them, you could easily get like 700-800 hours out of just what we have in English.
Oh yeah. People are always flabbergasted when they see how short Trails runs are because there's just so much optional content to do.
Mm-hmm. And even the cutscenes are just so fast.
Yeah, we can do a Trails run or two in the time it takes for most casual players to do the big sweep in CS4.
Oh boy!
Or the prologue of first chapter took me 8 hours.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I can definitely say when routing, there's a lot of different tiers we go through. Third is kind of like we're doing all of it on third right now, where it's like, hey, we're revamping entire fights for strategies. Then or for consistent strategies, like the first thing we try to find is that consistency. And then from there, we start trimming the fat more or less. And that's what a lot of 100% Azure routing was how can we save what do we need to do to save literally a singular action? Not even like an S-craft, just a singular action on this fight to save that tiny bit more of time. And a lot of the games really don't necessarily have that level of optimization to them. It's just like a few of them have really been overcooked and cooked so much in the labs that we're able to be like, yeah, we cannot save another action here.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Like in third the other day, Mannix and I were going back and forth on how to solve one of the easiest fights in the run. All you do is you cast a single art and the fight's over. And I'm like, how can we do this fight differently that it doesn't take longer, but we also don't have to do a menu for literally 1 quartz. 1 quartz is what I was trying to cut out of the run, and we couldn't do it. There was no way to do it. Every strat we could think of was like, oh, if you equip this, and it's like, yeah, but then we would just equip the 1 quartz anyways. And
so
we were at it for like an hour.
I believe we've been. Yeah, so we've been going on here for almost an hour 45 minutes. So that that I think is probably a good time to get it wrapped up.
Yeah.
Don't want to take too much time out of Ashen's day. Thank you to Ashen, who's been our
Thank you,
our
Thanks, Ashen.
gracious tech person for getting these sorts of streams going. But before we head off, where can everybody find you?
So I stream on the weekends mostly, and I'm going to be streaming right after this at my ChampionBeef Twitch channel. You can also find us in the speedrunning Discord. I don't know if other people have their own Discords. I have my own, but we're generally around. I'm going to get a link for the.
You can find any of us in the Trails Speedrun server, which you can
Absolutely.
go to any of the. If you can go to speedrun.com and go to any of the Trails games, there'll be a link to the Discord there on the icon that just says Discord. And we'd love to have you if any of you are interested.
Yeah, if you've ever been on the fence about playing these games or speedrunning these games, highly encourage it. Community is very welcoming. Even just casually, if you want to play through these games, even though you've got a 700-hour journey ahead of you, you will not regret it.
So, James Stodel?
You can find me on Twitch at Schtolteheim, Twitter at Schtolteheim_V. I'm not particularly active on either of those places, but you can also find me as an admin on the Falcom Speedrunning Discord, and as Beef mentioned, we'd be happy to help you out with any questions or curiosities you might have. Please look forward to Dinosaur Resurrection and White Witch.
Unfortunately, I don't Twitch just because my internet service is relatively terrible and I don't stream, but every so blue moon, if that, I do occasionally upload speedrun stuff on YouTube under my name here, James Picard _007, or I am also in the Trails and the Ease speedrun servers as well.
Yep. So just want to thank y'all for watching, and
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
We'll be talking about this for a whole another hour and 45 minutes.
Thank
you for having us.
RPG runners.
We could.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks all for watching. Go ahead and